It's a tradition all around the world, from Ethiopia to Italy, Sumatra to Seattle. The morning cup of coffee, a drink on the go for that jolt of energy on the way to work, something to sip while reading the newspaper, or even as the classic first date. In Thailand, coffee dates back to the first days of the modern city, brewed in its own unique way and served for a few cents in the shop houses of the old city. In Bangkok's Old Town, in ancient alleys and historic buildings, old traditions carry on, keeping alive recipes that trace their roots back to the days the first Hainanese migrants changed local mornings forever. So today, we're in the shadow of the old palace, testing our caffeine limits and working our way through history, one cup of coffee and one sweet toast at a time.
I'm so caffeine crashing.
There's a famous story about the origin of coffee, which claims it all started with goats. Basically, according to the legend, in Ethiopia in the 9th century AD, a farmer named Kaldi, who lived in a place called Kafae, noticed his herd started running around with extra energy after eating some mysterious berries. So Kaldi gathered up a sack of the fruits and brought them to a nearby monastery for examination. There, the monks declared this to be the work of the devil and threw them into a fire, where they smelled so entrancing that they removed them from the coals, covered them with water to cool them down, and coffee. Now, this didn't happen. In fact, it's a story that doesn't actually appear in writing until like 700 years after it supposedly took place. But the real history of coffee is still pretty wild. It is almost definitely from Ethiopia. But by the time it started to spread, it actually emerged from the nearby country of Yemen, just across the Red Sea, where since at least the 15th century it was used in Sufi religious rituals, and it was most popular in a city called Al-Mocha, anglicized as Mocha. Anyway, soon enough coffee had arrived through Yemeni traders to the port of Venice, where it first appears on the European continent, though for a while it would remain a Venetian specialty, as even though the Crusades had ended, anti-Muslim fervor was high and coffee shipped from Yemen was banned in much of Europe as a Muslim drink. Then, in the year 1600, Pope Clement VIII declared that coffee was now, as a matter of fact, Christian, and thus the Age of Coffee would begin. Within a generation, it could be found across Europe and the Americas, and then brought by Dutch traders to Indonesia, and specifically the island of Java. The drink would quickly catch on, and from there it would spread throughout the continent, and it was in what's now Singapore and Malaysia where Hainan Chinese domestic workers mastered brewing the stuff. They'd open simple cafes known as Kopitiams, with the first emerging in the late 1800s. And just a few years later, well, those same people had set up their own businesses here, too, in Bangkok. The first cafes in this city would open in the newly settled Hainanese neighborhoods on the outskirts of Chinatown. So that's where we begin, with one of the oldest surviving authentic Hainanese coffee shops along the northern edge of Bangkok's Old Town.
So I always start my day with a coffee, always. One coffee. Daria, should we rock, paper, scissors how we're gonna do this today? I don't think I'm gonna be able to drink coffee at every place that we're going. I think we need some kind of a rotation. So we all got one in the first place. And I think we're all gonna get one in the next place just out of force of habit. You're the biggest coffee drinker here, yeah? Today? What? You're the biggest coffee drinker out of the three of us, yeah?
Yes. And I haven't had mine. I had to...
Drink. Don't wait for...
Wait.
Bangkok's oldest coffee shops opened before the sunrise, as early as 5 o'clock in the morning. In the 100 years since coffee culture took root here in the city, many of these places have expanded or adapted, but not this one. It's called Heng Li, and even though it's not the oldest in town, it is probably the best preserved. Here, nothing's changed. Not the furniture, not the appliances, and not the menu. There's only 4 things served here, 2 drinks and 2 foods. There's coffee and tea, and for eating soft-boiled eggs and this, something called kaya, toast served with a jam made from coconut cream, sugar, and egg, originally from the Malay Peninsula, created by Hainanese cooks and modeled after an ancient dessert called serikaya, brought to Malacca 500 years ago by the Portuguese. It takes as long as 7 hours of constant stirring to make kaya the right way, so here it's the most expensive thing on the menu. And I guess that's something else that's never changed here, the prices, where even with the kaya toast, the tab for the 3 of us came out in total to less than $2.
I love excuses to come back to this area. I just ran to the ATM because these businesses, a lot of them are still very old school, cash only. And walking past, there's all these people just roasting foods and making snacks on the street. We're really close to Nanglung Market, if you remember that video. And so there's, this is one of the best and most unexplored parts of town. Unfortunately, we're going to be running through it because the typical coffee shop hours in Bangkok opens at about 5 or 6 in the morning and closes by 2:30. And so that's for the old school Hainanese, old city coffee shops.
So we need to be 3 liters of coffee deep by midday. And bread.
This is the kind of place where you're not supposed to rush. You bring a newspaper, sit down, and stay for the morning. But the owner told us politely but firmly that the regulars would arrive soon, so we should stop taking up her table space. Because in these old-school cafes, publicity is a lot less important than making sure that nothing keeps the neighbors from their breakfast. So we'd have to move on. And anyway, we still had a ton of coffee to go.
I've had 1 coffee and I'm already kind of at my all right, we're good to go. 1 more is going to be a risk. 6 more, and Jasper might have to, you might have to, in post-production, slow down the audio so I'm not just going at 100 miles an hour. Still worth it to come back to the old city though.
The buildings in Bangkok's Old City, at least as they stand today, mostly date back to the first 3 decades of the 1900s. That, of course, was when much of Thailand's commerce moved from the water to the land and when permanent restaurants started to show up. And that's the same time that we first find record of coffee sold in the kingdom. Today, the oldest surviving cafe dates all the way back to 1906, an hour north of the city in a province called Pathum Thani. And the coffee shops built by the Hainanese quickly blossomed into a national industry.
One of the things about walking through the old city is that you walk past coffee shops all the time, and it's not always just like bricks and mortar. Some of them are carts, trucks, little windows. And usually when I'm just out for a walk or we've just eaten something, I'll stop for a coffee or an Oliang. I have to remind myself not to do that. The one thing I absolutely cannot do under any circumstances is add any surprise bonus coffees to our coffee crawl.
Now, when the Hainanese arrived with their coffee shop concept, they found a city with a brand new restaurant scene already dominated by Chinese migrants, specifically Teochew from Chaozhou and Shantou. Many of those places, located in Chinatown and across the old city, well, they saw the success of the Kopitiams and adapted their own menus to include the latest trends. As a side note, by the way, that didn't just happen in Thailand. As a matter of fact, the term Kopitiam was actually coined by Minnan Hokkien Chinese. Anyway, that brings us to our next place. One of our favorites and somewhere we've filmed before on a different topic. The legendary Hia Tai Kee.
The first time we came here to film was because we were talking about the Hong Kong cha chan tings. and how a place like this has a similar kind of root origin to those legendary places, and that has a similar, not identical, but a similar root origin to things like the Kopitiams in Singapore and Malaysia. It's all connected. These toast, sausage, egg, coffee, breakfast, leave me alone, I'll leave you alone, read my newspaper, and then head to work. You know, we kind of need to rush, but these places are made to not be rushed in a way, you know.
Hia Tai Kee has been open for 72 years, which actually makes it young in the Bangkok coffee scene. But that's the fun thing about this place. Everything this well preserved is a time capsule to a specific point in time, and here we can see what was popular on coffee shop menus a generation after the first ones opened. Here they serve things like toast with bacon and American fried rice. But of course, there's also the stuff that first came over with the Hainanese, including things like this: an egg barely warmed, served with Chinese condiments such as white pepper and light soy sauce.
I've never had this. I know that this is popular. I understand that this is an important thing in coffee houses. For whatever reason, for me, I just thought it's just an uncooked egg, and I never ordered it. And I am instantly regretting having wasted the last 2 years of my breakfast life. With the energy jolt from my second coffee of the morning, and with a glass of almost raw egg, I feel like Rocky, just about to go run up the steps of the old palace.
The first coffee grown in Thailand wasn't recorded until the year 1976, which is obviously a long time after these first cafes opened. That first plantation, by the way, was on soil previously used to farm opium, and coffee production here was introduced as a way to bring economic growth to what had been drug-producing regions in the north. Anyway, that's a different subject, but the point is that coffee sold in this country, starting with the first Hainanese vendors, was imported. And that meant that when things went sideways in the years of World War II, well, Thailand pretty much ran out of coffee. Until those years, coffee here was made in a very simple way. It was essentially coffee beans from Indonesia or Vietnam, roasted and then ground, then steeped in hot water in something called a tong tom or coffee sock. Then it would either be served straight up or mixed with tea for a beverage called norgao, known in Singapore or Hong Kong as cham. Anyway, in the 1940s, because of that coffee shortage, cafes here had to get creative. And that's how we find the beginning of the unique beverages that today are perhaps the most definitive versions of what we call Thai coffee. To stretch the now rare and expensive coffee beans further, one recipe was developed adding soybeans, corn, salt, tamarind seeds, brown sugar, rice, and even butter, which altogether makes something called Kafae Boran, or ancient coffee. As a matter of fact, that's what we were served at our very first stop this morning, and while it's not common today, it still can be found at places that date back to that era. What is common is another drink with roots in the 1940s, something that takes its name from the Teochew word for iced coffee, pronounced Oliang. Oliang is everywhere, made from coffee beans mixed with things like brown sugar, corn, soybeans, sesame seeds, and sugar, with the most important flavor component coming from cardamom. And as the name implies, it's served cold over ice, and I'm going to be honest, this is something I'm kind of obsessed with. In a lot of our old OTR videos, if you see me with a black liquid in front of me, it's probably Oliang. I drink this stuff all the time, and finding this sort of unlocked Bangkok, at least to me. Now, I take my Oliang black, but there's another variation that adds a ton of condensed milk, and that's called Yok Lor, which literally means flying wheel, as in the old days the brand of milk used had a wheel as a logo, and the story goes that when vendors would lift up the can to pour it into the cup, it looked like the wheel was flying. Anyway, the reason I bring all this up is because it was after World War II when coffee really went mainstream, and when street-side stalls popped up almost everywhere serving the old Hainanese breakfasts, well, the drinks that took off with them were uniquely Thai. So as we found our next stop, a popular roadside stall opened only about 40 years ago, well, with 4 traditional cups down, for our next hit of caffeine, we'd be going for something that was invented right here in Bangkok.
This place has been here since 1986, so it's almost 40 years old, this one shop on the street, which is surrounded by some of the oldest cafes in Bangkok. But the interesting thing is that the menu is almost exactly the same. Coffee, tea, things involving toast, in which case in here it's grilled over charcoal, which is amazing. Condensed milk with this one. Man, you really taste the charcoal. This is so smoky with the butter and the condensed milk. One of the biggest mistakes that tourists make when they come to Bangkok, and I know that this is true because it's a mistake that we made, is that Chinatown is Yellow Rat Road. And the truth is, by far, the coolest part of Chinatown, in my opinion, I mean, you get the big photo of Yellow Rat, it's a beautiful view, but the coolest places are a few blocks away from the main central strip. If you'd walk parallel to Yellow Rat Road to the north, and then you check out all the little alleys, there's markets on every little alley that you walk past. This is very old school. There's shops that are repairing things. There's a watch repairman right there. Guy over there just reading his newspaper, having his coffee. This is very much like, we're 1 block away from the tourist center of Bangkok, and this is very different, and it's so much cooler to explore. And I better keep drinking coffee because the sugar crash and caffeine crash is just beginning to hit it. Unbelievable, though.
Now, Bangkok's oldest coffee shops might take their roots from the Hainanese, but that's not the only thing they brought to the city. It was just a few months ago on this channel that we told the story of cook shops, the unique restaurants that had such an impact on local culture. Because so many of those Hainanese migrants had previously worked as domestic help in wealthy foreign homes, well, they're the ones who introduced Western food, or some version of it, to this part of Southeast Asia. The story we tried to tell had some urgency because those restaurants are quickly becoming extinct. As time has passed and Thailand's opened up, the simple old-school versions of Western dishes have been replaced by the real thing. And you could say the same thing about the original coffee culture. Ever since the first domestic coffee was planted in 1976, the country has found itself swept up in the same wave of cookie-cutter cafes as the rest of the world. And that's not even mentioning the artisanal stuff, with Chiang Mai considered one of the leading coffee cities on Earth. In Bangkok, along with organic and upscale roasters, there are a wide number of homegrown chains, and of course the international ones, with Starbucks opening its first outlet in 1998 and recently announcing a plan to expand to 800 stores nationwide. But that doesn't mean there isn't a place for the old school stuff. Unlike the disappearing cook shops, Bangkok's original cafes are experiencing something of a renaissance. After all, has anyone really ever managed to improve on a simple breakfast of coffee, egg, and toast? And nowhere is this newfound popularity more evident than a few blocks north of Chinatown, where there's a place called Lok Yun that's been open since 1933, and where every day there's a line of tourists and Instagrammers that stretches down the block, even though at least a few of the tables are always full of the same people who've been coming here for their entire lives.
What we have, they have the really simple egg combos. How many eggs do you want? How many toppings do you want? I got 2 and 2. 2 eggs scrambled, Chinese sausage, bacon. Daria got 2 eggs scrambled, hot dog, bacon, and ham. We've got the kaya toast, and we've got the ham and egg sandwich, black coffee, soda, Ovaltine or Milo, and then the tea, which is free. That's just what you drink. I'm telling you, people love this simplicity, right? Like, everyone who's making this, you know, artisanal stuff, it's all great. It's all moved the food industry forward. And yet, sometimes you just want a $1 plate. It's okay, thank you very much. Jasper's breakfast. Sometimes all you want is a $1 plate of eggs, bacon, sausage, little chili sauce, and a cup of drip coffee.
Hurricane Daria, he's here for the ham sandwiches.
Blue jeans, right? 100 years ago you could wear them in public, 100 years from now you can still wear blue jeans. Everything else, styles come and go.
Do it 100 years ago. Women got right to wear jeans less than that time, so speak for yourself. No, it's political.
Well, caffeine crush has started. Sugar crush simultaneously. We made it through a lot of coffee today. Some tea, a ton of sugar. Oh yeah, we had a bunch of kaya toast as well. This is harder than eating. This is harder than, like, I can force myself to eat as much as it takes for one video. Like, we're used to that. But it doesn't matter how much, it's not about the liquid, like, it's the caffeine that when it starts to wear off, like, I literally would just find a parked car like a cat to just curl up underneath and take a nap right now. We have one more place to visit, and it's right there, and that feels like the longest 100 meters of my life. But it's the oldest coffee shop still open in Bangkok. We cannot skip that one.
เริ่มก่อตั้งเลยก็จะเป็นตั้งแต่สมัยอากงอะค่ะรุ่นแรกก็ประมาณพ.ศ. 2462อากงมาจากเกาะไหหลำแล้วก็มาทำร้านกาแฟก่อนหน้านี้จะตั้งอยู่ตรงภัตตาคารตรงข้ามภัตตาคารยิ้มก็ขายกาแฟแล้วก็มีสังขยามีขนมปังประมาณนี้ค่ะแล้วก็ย้ายมาตึกเนี้ยที่นี่ประมาณ50 ปี
Here on a back alley, just steps away from the busiest part of Chinatown, the oldest cafe in Bangkok still sells the drinks and snacks once prepared by a family of Hainanese immigrants, a tradition kept alive uninterrupted for 104 years.
ก็คือสมัยอากงนะคะอากงก็คือจะคั่วกาแฟที่ร้านเดิมจะคั่วที่หน้าร้านเลยนะคะคั่วสดๆข้างหน้าบ้านเลยข้างหน้าที่จะขายกาแฟเลยแล้วพอมารุ่นหลังก็จะคั่วให้คุณพ่อที่เป็นรุ่น2อ่ะเขาคั่วพอรุ่น4รุ่นมาตอนนี้ก็คือจะให้น้องบอสธนโชตินะคะเป็นคนคั่วแทนก็สืบทอดมาแต่ละรุ่นที่ตั้งร้านเก่าเข้ามาจากตรงหัวเส้งเฮงทางถนนข้างนอกนี่นะคะเนี่ยค่ะหัวเส้งเฮงที่คือถนนเยาวราชแล้วก็เลี้ยวมานี่ยิ้มเฮียเราอยู่ออฟฟิศประมาณนี้ไอ้ก็ดอนโนโอเคประมาณนี้ค่ะเนี่ยร้านอยู่ตรงนี้แล้วก็นี่ก็คือสมัยก่อนที่ร้านนี้ตรงนี้นะคะมีร้านกาแฟนี่มีนี่คุณแม่นี่คืออากงที่ตั้งร้านอากง
The walls at Ek Teng Pu Ki are a museum, with old family photos and even a menu from about 90 years ago, which is actually a license from the days of Prime Minister Pibun Songkram, when ice was rationed and you needed this to show that you could legally serve cold drinks. Altogether, from 1919 to the present day, these pictures tell the story of not just how the modern breakfast took shape, not just how coffee culture started in Thailand, but how, thanks to a simple berry, brought to Bangkok by way of Ethiopia, Yemen, Italy, the Netherlands, Indonesia, and Malaysia, a group of migrants from an island in the South China Sea could build a life in Thailand, one that continues to the present.
ก็ดีใจนะคะว่าเรามีร้านตั้งแต่สมัยอากงแล้วพอมารุ่น2คือรุ่นพ่อแล้วก็รุ่น3ก็คือรุ่นของเรากับน้องชายแล้วก็มารุ่น4ก็คือรุ่นหลานๆแล้วก็มีลูกชายลูกสาวมาช่วยกันทำพัฒนาต่อยอดให้ร้านที่แบบตั้งแต่สมัยอากงยังอยู่ได้แล้วก็เปลี่ยนรูปแบบแล้วก็เพิ่มเติมโดยที่เรายังยึดเอกลักษณ์ในความเป็นโบราณที่ตั้งแต่สมัยอากงเคยทำพวกกาแฟขนมปังแล้วก็ยังมีอยู่เดิมแต่เราเพิ่มเมนูเพื่อให้ลูกค้าสามารถมาทานอาหารได้แบบหลากหลายมากขึ้นก็ดีใจค่ะก็อยู่ที่นี่มาถ้าเฉพาะที่นี่คืออยู่ตั้งแต่นี่เปิดร้านที่นี่ก็เกือบ50 ปีเพราะว่านี่ก็จะ50แล้วก็เปลี่ยนนะคะเมื่อก่อนก็เงียบๆจะเป็นบ้านคนส่วนใหญ่แต่เดี๋ยวนี้เขาก็จะเปลี่ยนเป็นมีร้านกาแฟเพิ่มมาหลายร้านอยู่แล้วก็มีพวกคาเฟ่แล้วตึกแถวนี้ก็จะเปลี่ยนทุบทิ้งไปมากแล้วก็มาเป็นที่จอดรถแล้วก็เป็นร้านขายรองเท้าเพราะว่าในสำเพ็งมันจะมีร้านรองเท้าเยอะเขาก็จะเปลี่ยนเป็นร้านขายรองเท้าแต่นี้จะมีคาเฟ่เยอะมากเลย
Today, Thailand ranks 24th in the world in coffee consumption, which might not be as high as other countries in the region, but it's a number that doubled between 2009 and 2019 and continues to increase by more than 10% every year. And while the dominant chain in Bangkok might be Starbucks, a domestic company known as Cafe Amazon is now the world's number 6 and fastest growing chain of coffee shops, with more than 3,300 across Asia. All around the city in the artist enclaves like Ari and Talad Noi, in places with young people like the colleges and universities, in upscale shopping malls and trendy neighborhoods, there are more and more cafes opening where baristas make coffee with a careful technique, showcasing the best of local strains like Doi Chang and Doi Tung. But all of it, well, it owes a debt of gratitude to the very first Hainanese migrants who built the places like this that brought coffee culture to Thailand.
So much history in places like this. It's like, I almost feel like we did this wrong today. Like going from place to place to place to place, you know, you sit in a place like this with this old school food, you know, really simple, almost raw egg, some toast with the kaya jam coffee, tea. And like, you know, you want to sit here with a book, you want to sit here with your friends and just talk about nothing, you know. So rushing from place to place, especially, forget about the fact that I'm sugar and caffeine crashing after a lot of coffee. You know, just in terms of the vibe and atmosphere of this kind of thing, you know, it's not meant to be rushed. And I really, really, really like these places. It's almost even more than some of the older restaurants. There's just such a history here. It's such a, you know, you don't come here to bring your laptop and work on Wi-Fi. It's not that kind of coffee shop. And my generation doesn't really know anything beyond that. You know, a coffee shop is where you go to work, but not in places like this. And yeah, super cool that this still exists. I'm so caffeine crashing.
Subscribe to the channel for more from OTR. Please consider supporting us on Patreon. It's how we keep this channel going, and your support means a ton. Find the links below for our Instagram and social media, and we'll see you next week.